When I initially read this story, when I started reading it, I kind of thought that maybe he had just kind of like walked in on a group of actors. And, it's New York, and, running into actors isn't the craziest thing. You are bound to run into a few of them. So I didn't really think much of it. And then as I kept reading, it just started getting weirder and weirder and weirder. And then it was just like, what is going on here? It's a very strange story, and I didn't really know what to make of it. I don't know if what he was dealing with. Were they men in black? Were they time travelers? Were they ghosts? I have no idea. It's just one of those types of cases that is just so strange. One day in the mid 1990s, actor Rick Aiello was out shopping with his wife. Before heading home, he decided to stop at a tobacco shop and grab some cigarettes. Upon entering said store, Rick would be confronted by something he truly did not understand. Something that left him searching for answers for years to come. Being the son of Hollywood star Danny Aiello wasn't easy for Rick Aiello, born September 21st, 1955. He wasn't much interested in being a movie star like his dad, and spent most of his 20s working around nightclubs as a bartender and sometimes a bouncer. He did not start appearing in movies until he was nearly 30 years old. Due to his imposing size, he often found himself playing mobsters, tough guys, and police officers. A close personal friend of Spike Lee, Rick often appeared in his movies, including in one of his most famous roles as Officer Long in Lee's Do the Right Thing. He would go on to appear in around 65 productions before retiring in 2016. In 1990, Rick married Arlene Ann Urkick, and the two would go on to have 2 children. It was with Arlene that Rick would have the most bizarre encounter of his life. It was the mid-1990s New York. Rick and Arlene had spent the day shopping and getting groceries. Rick recalled that he was out of cigarettes and decided to drive over to the tobacco shop, which was almost right next to the grocery store. He walked in and found himself confronted by something he readily admitted he wasn't prepared for. Standing in front of the counter were 5 people, all about in their mid-20s. They all had their backs to me but one. The one facing me was standing at the end of the counter right in front of me. What struck me as odd right away was the way he was dressed. First, let me say that he was tall and very thin, and wore strange, small black framed glasses. He was very white and pale complexioned. He had on a black suit with a black tie, and the brightest, whitest shirt I have ever seen. As Rick stood in line waiting his turn, he noticed the man was fidgeting with something in his hand. He had a gold 1940-ish type thin cigarette case open in his hand. He was putting white candy cigarettes in the gold case and talking about how important it was that he had them. Strange, but the whole impact had not hit me yet. As seconds of waiting turned into minutes, Rick began to grow impatient and attempted to figure out what was taking so long. The 4 others still facing the woman behind the counter had been talking to her. She had just finished seeing all their IDs, and I caught her asking, "Where are you people from?" They all had identification from different states, and at one point the clerk said, "Come on," like they all had fake IDs or something. Then she asked, "What are you people up to? Who are you?" Rick acknowledged that he had been going to that shop for 5 years and had come to know the clerk. I had never heard her ask such questions or act that way. I do know that she knows her stuff when it comes to IDs. Here in New York, accepting a false ID is no excuse for selling tobacco products to minors, and the state takes it very seriously. Anyway, now I'm tuned in and really watching these 5 strangers, and taking a real interest in what the heck is going on. Now I really look the people over. This is when Rick finally began to realize just how strange they were. He could only describe their clothing as, quote, odd and outdated, the type of clothes that were stylish in the 1940s. One of the group, the only female, wore a very large ribbed corduroy jumper type dress and a pair of real leather white 1960s go-go boots. She wore a cotton wool 1940s type coat, the like you have not seen since watching the movie It's a Wonderful Life. Rick told this to Steiger, noting that it was odd given that it was summer and quite hot that afternoon. Now I'm tingling from the energy in the room. The three others also wore old-style clothing. No Nikes, nothing from the present, nothing. After taking all this in so far, I start to look at their faces and listen to them talk. They all had very pale faces, and in retrospect, they all acted peculiarly. I think the more I felt they were not right, the more they tried to act more casual. To Rick, it was as if they had been caught and were attempting to alter their behavior in real time to fit what they believed was normal. They all acted very friendly in a kind of superficial way. None of the five answered any more of the clerk's questions after she appeared to sense something odd about them. They paid for a couple of cigars and seemed overly cheerful to avert our attention from their strange appearance and off-kilter behavior. After the clerk took the money, they turned, and for the first time Rick was able to see all their faces. It was then that he noticed 5 suitcases assembled at the door. He had not noticed them when he walked in. Each grabbed their individual suitcase and walked out the door. Each suitcase was individually just as strange as the people were. Remember the old-fashioned type that looked as if they were made of fabric, with a kind of basket weave design? Okay, that was one suitcase. The rest were equally dated, as if they were from the 1930s or 40s. Not one of the suitcases was even modern enough to be made of plastic, like a seamless Samsonite type. All of them were very, very old styles, but they looked like they were only about a year old, leather straps and all. When they were out the door, I felt my body buzz and tingle, as if it had been touched with electricity. I turned to the woman behind the counter, and she was white as a sheet. I asked her what was the matter, but she didn't answer. I asked what they had said to her, and she replied that she didn't know what they were talking about. She said she remembered them standing there at the counter, but she could not remember what had been said. Puzzled, I reminded her that I had been standing in line and could see that they had engaged her in conversation. I said that she had certainly appeared to be intent on what they were talking about. The clerk said she didn't even notice me come in until they left. To Rick, it was as if she was coming out of a trance, almost confused about what was going on around her. He told the clerk that he had overheard her asking them where they were from and what they were up to. He is certain that he heard them say that they, quote, came from afar, and that they, quote, needed the cigars for a play. This did not seem to jog her memory at all. It was as if the entire conversation had been wiped from her mind. None of the 5 people had made eye contact with me all the while they were in the tobacco store, nor did they turn and look at me when I came in, as most people would. Even after I stood right behind them, up in line, they acted as if I was not there. The door had a window which allowed for a clear view of the parking lot. Rick could see them walking away. After the 5 bizarre people walked out of the tobacco shop, they began to cross the parking lot, which was empty except for my car and some others way down the plaza. The smoke shop is at the end of the plaza, and unless someone is getting cigarettes or cigars, that end is empty. I had a clear view of them, and as they were walking away, I asked the clerk again what it was they talked to her about. She was still confused and scattered, but finally she said, "I don't know what those people are up to, but they are not who they look like." That was all she could say. Rick found this comment truly odd, especially in hindsight. He continued to watch them, wondering where their car was. As soon as he thought this, the group did something that Rick could not believe. They disappeared. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon in broad daylight, they vanished. I blurted out to the clerk that the 5 strangers who were in her tobacco shop just disappeared into thin air. But she did not appreciate the statement. She was still freaked from whatever happened in there. Rick paid for his cigarettes and exited the store. He began to wonder if his mind was playing tricks on him. Did he really see 5 people vanish in front of his eyes? He walked over and spoke to his wife, who was sitting in the car. She had been out front of the store waiting the whole time. She was annoyed because she thought I was in the smoke shop shooting the breeze with the clerk, and not concerned about how warm it was for her in that parked car. She angrily wondered why it had taken me so long in the tobacco store. Rick informed her that there had been 5 customers ahead of him, and he had to wait for them before he could be served. This seemed to anger her even more. "Well, I've been sitting here waiting for you to come out, and nobody has come out since you went in," Rick recalled her saying. He was dumbfounded. Incredulously, I asked her if she hadn't seen those 5 strangely dressed people with suitcases walking across the parking lot. "They had to walk right in front of you," I said. My wife, who is really not normally pushy, said, "I've been here for 10 minutes and was about to come in to see what the holdup was. No one has come out of that store." This is when Rick decided to tell her the whole story. She swore that she was glaring out the door, waiting for me, and nobody came through the door. His wife didn't see anyone come out of the store, so it calls into question everything that he saw. He said he saw them, grab their suitcases and then walk out the door. He watched them walk across the parking lot. He watched them vanish into thin air. But his wife didn't see any of that. And she was right there. So, was everything he remembered a screen memory? Or was it something else? Was something else going on? It's such a strange story. So what happened? Had Rick, like the clerk, also been placed in some kind of trance, and his memory of them exiting the store was merely a projection, possibly a type of screen memory, hiding from him the reality of what actually happened inside that store? It was clear that Rick had walked in on something, but what that something was he didn't know. Rick acknowledged that he felt a sense of well-being after leaving the store. He was just happy to be out of there. As the years have gone by, he reflects back on the experience with fondness, believing that for a brief moment he was afforded a peek at a reality not his own, that he suspects, momentarily in the presence of beings possibly not of this world. The more I reflected on the incident, the more I picked up on details of the exchange. The 5 out-of-place strangers seemed benevolent in a funny way, and the manner in which they were dressed seemed to indicate that they didn't appear on this plane often. They all looked very young, but no one in their early 20s would wear those uncool clothes, especially the shoes, which were definitely off-style in appearance. And winter coats? It was 78 degrees outside. The suitcases were the icing on the cake. Author Brad Steiger, who transcribed his interview with Aiello for inclusion in his 2003 book, Real Ghosts, Restless Spirits, and Haunted Places, had his own thoughts on just who or what Rick encountered that day. Rick Aiello's encounter might suggest that we are dealing with entities from another dimension of time and space, perhaps even time travelers from a distant future who wanted to explore life in the 21st century, but who didn't read the guidebook closely enough when it described the items of apparel that would be in vogue in our time. Or maybe the 5 strange entities who bought candy cigarettes to place in a gold case and who bought cigars as a part of a role in a play really were higher spirit beings, just playing at life as a material being for a few hours before they vanished back to their dimension. One might assume that Rick had merely encountered a group of actors, which might explain the candy cigarettes, the talk of plays, the strange and outdated clothing and suitcases, if not for the fact that Rick watched them seemingly vanish into thin air, as well the weird trance-like states that both he and the clerk experienced, as well as the loss of or tinkering with their memories. The clerk could barely remember anything, while Rick was certain that he had watched them exit the store, cross the parking lot, and vanish into thin air, something that apparently did not happen. His wife, who was watching the door like a hawk, was adamant that nobody came out of the store, and certainly not 5 strangely dressed people, unless she too was part of the experience, and her memory was also tinkered with. In MIB lore, you will find references to outdated clothing, outdated vehicles, and strange behavior. Author John Keel often wrote of the seeming inability of these MIBs to fit in with the people around them. Another common factor in MIB reports is the tinkering with or complete wiping of the memories of people. I have covered cases on this channel in which people found themselves in the presence of weird men in black suits and how they felt like something was off, like they had been hypnotized or placed into a trance, leading to the inability to recall exactly what had transpired in their presence. Is this what happened to Rick Aiello and the clerk that summer day?